The evening light faded into the grey of twilight as I turned my key in the lock, a familiar sound in an increasingly unfamiliar world. My wife, Clara, had been distant lately, her laughter too forced, her glances too fleeting. I tried to dismiss the gnawing doubts, but the seed of suspicion had rooted deep within me. I entered our apartment quietly. The first thing I noticed was a pair of men's shoes in the hallway, sleek, expensive-looking, definitely not mine. My heart hammered against my ribs as a cold line of sweat traced its way down my spine. Size 12. I'm a size 9. Clara? My voice echoed off the walls, more strained than I intended. Silence greeted me. I walked through the living room, the dining area, past the kitchen. Her purse was on the table, contents spilled like a silent scream. The air felt thick, charged with a tension that made it hard to breathe. Reaching the bedroom, I found the door shut tight. Locked. My palms pressed against the wood, feeling the barrier like a physical blow. Clara, open the door. Just a minute. Her voice was a hoarse whisper, a shadow of her usual melodious tone. Minutes stretched like hours. I paced the hallway, each step a drumbeat of betrayal. When the door finally opened, Clara's face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed and haunted. She seemed to look through me, not at me. What's going on, Clara? I tried to meet her eyes, desperate for some hint of the woman I married. She brushed past me, her body language all sharp edges and closed doors. Nothing. I just needed some time alone. I wanted to believe her. God, how I wanted to. But the unexplained shoes and her locked door gnawed at me. I spent the night tossing and turning, caught in a limbo of distrust and denial. At dawn, I rose, driven by a need for answers. As morning light seeped into our apartment, I found Clara in the living room, her sobs a low, keening sound that chilled my blood. She knelt in front of an open suitcase. It was then that I saw him in a man, pale and unmistakably dead. Naked, crammed into that small space as though he were nothing more than a piece of unwanted clothing. The room spun. I reached for the phone, my fingers numb as I dialed 911. The police arrived within minutes, their questions sharp, their eyes suspicious. I showed them the CCTV footage, the man entering our apartment confidently, as if it wasn't his first time. Clara striking him with a desperation that was hard to watch. Then the grim task of hiding him away in the suitcase. As the officers took Clara away, her eyes met mine, filled with something I couldn't quite decipher, regret, fear, perhaps a plea for understanding. She whispered something lost in the cacophony of police radios and murmuring officers. I stood alone in the wreckage of my life, the truth as cold and final as the body in the suitcase. Justice might be served, but at what cost? Clara's secrets had entangled us both in a tragedy that would leave indelible scars. As the door closed behind her, the silence of the apartment enveloped me, a stark reminder of the price of truth. The story was just beginning, and the shadows of doubt had only deepened. The stark fluorescent lights of the police station did nothing to ease the tension that knotted my stomach. I sat across from Detective Marlene Hayes, her sharp gaze dissecting every word I spoke. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and worn leather. "Let's go over this again," Detective Hayes said, tapping her pen against the notepad. "You installed cameras because you suspected your wife was cheating?" "Yes," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I needed to know the truth." "And when you came home early yesterday, you found no evidence of another person until today?" "That's correct. I looked everywhere. There's no way out except the front door and the windows, but we're 10 stories up. It doesn't make sense." Hayes leaned back, her eyes narrowing. "And the dead man, have you ever seen him before?" I shook my head. "Never. But he seemed familiar with the place." The door to the interrogation room creaked open and a young officer peeked in. "Detective, we've got something." We followed him to a room where multiple screens displayed various angles of our apartment. One of the techs pointed to a frame where Clara and the man were arguing just moments before the fatal blow. "Enhance that," Hayes commanded. The image sharpened, revealing the man's face in clearer detail, a face that suddenly triggered a memory. "I've seen him," I blurted out. "He's a friend of Clara's brother, Tom. I met him at a family gathering last year." Hayes' eyes lit up with this new information. "Get Tom in here. Now." The wait for Tom felt interminable. When he finally arrived, his face was a mask of confusion and worry. Hayes didn't waste any time. "Do you know this man?" She slid a photo across the table to Tom. Tom's face paled as he looked at the picture. "Yeah, that's Danny. Danny Mullen." "Why? What's happened?" "He's dead, Tom," Hayes said bluntly. "Found in your sister's suitcase." Tom slumped in his chair, shock overtaking his features. But why? How?" "We were hoping you could tell us something about their relationship," Hayes pressed. Tom rubbed his face, thinking. "They were close, yeah. Danny helped Clara out a lot when she started her online business. Always around, helping with tech stuff. I had no idea they were involved." The pieces of the puzzle were slowly forming a clearer picture, but the motives remained murky. "Did Danny have any enemies? Anyone that might want to harm him?" Hayes asked. "Not that I know of," Tom replied. "He was a good guy, kept to himself mostly. Except for Clara, I don't think he had many close friends." As Tom's statement continued, my mind raced. Clara's online business, her mysterious meetings, the late hours, could it have been more than just an affair? Was Danny involved in something dangerous that had finally caught up with him? Detective Hayes seemed to follow the same line of thought. "We'll need to dig deeper into Mr. Mullen's background. And we'll need your wife's cooperation. Can you help with that?" I nodded, my resolve firming. "I'll do whatever it takes to uncover the truth." As Tom and I left the station, the weight of the unfolding drama pressed down on me. The mystery of Danny's death was just the surface. Below it, darker currents swirled, secrets that could unravel lives. Clara's, mine, and who knew how many others. The night air was cool and crisp as I stepped outside, a stark contrast to the heated confines of the police station. Air was cool and crisp as I move was clear, confront Clara. I needed answers, and this time, I would get them. The truth was close, palpable, a shadow just out of reach, waiting to be grasped. The jailhouse visiting room felt cold and impersonal, its stark walls echoing with whispered confessions and silent tears. Clara sat on the other side of the thick glass, her appearance more haggard than I remembered from just a few days ago. The receiver trembled slightly in her hand. "Michael," she began, her voice a fragile thread, "I never wanted you to find out like this. I had to know, Clara. I had to understand why." My voice was firm, demanding. "Who was Danny to you, really? And don't lie to me, or not now." She hesitated, then her resolve crumbled. It started as help for the business, but it became something else. "An affair?" "It wasn't just that," she rushed to explain. "Danny got involved in some dangerous dealings. He said it was a quick way to make money, enough to expand the business. I tried to stop him, I swear I did." My voice I pressed, my curiosity spiked with fear. "Smuggling. Small stuff at first. Then it got bigger. He was using my shipments to move things. Illegal things." Her eyes were pools of regret. "I told him to end it. That's what we fought about that day." A guard paced nearby, his presence a reminder of the limitations on our time. "Why the suitcase, Clara? How did it end like this?" Tears streamed down her cheeks. "He threatened to drag me down with him if I pulled out. During the fight, I pushed him. He hit his head. It was an accident, Michael." "And hiding him? Was that an accident too?" My voice cracked, laden with betrayal. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I thought I could fix it before it got out of hand. The simplicity of her terror struck a chord in me. Fear could drive anyone to extremes. But was it the whole truth? I need to know everything, Clara. It's the only way I can help you now. She nodded, wiping her face. There's a ledger, in my office, behind the safe. It has everything, every transaction Danny forced on me. It will prove I didn't want any part of this. The visiting hours were winding down, a stern-looking officer signaling me. I'll find it. I'll get you a lawyer, Clara. She placed her hand on the glass as I stood to leave. Michael, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. As I walked away, her words echoed in my mind, mingling with countless doubts. Was her regret for her actions, or just for being caught? I needed that ledger to find out. Back at our apartment, I went straight to her office. The safe was exactly where she said it would be. Behind it, tucked away in a false back panel, was the ledger, a thick notebook filled with dates, names, and numbers. Flipping through the pages, I realized the depth of the web Danny had woven. Clara was caught in the middle, perhaps deeper than she admitted. I took the ledger and headed straight to Detective Hayes. Handing it over felt like lifting a part of the burden off my shoulders. Hayes flipped through it, her eyes widening with each page. This could change everything. Good work. Will this help Clara? I asked, a part of me still fighting for the woman I loved. It'll help her case, definitely. But it's going to bring a lot more people down with it. We're looking at a major operation. The plot thickened, as did my resolve. Danny's dealings were just the surface, the ledger was the map to navigating through this labyrinth. Clara's fate, and my own peace, hinged on following wherever it led. Leaving the station, I felt a mix of dread and determination. The journey ahead promised no easy paths, but I was ready to walk it, through every dark turn and hidden doorway, until the full truth was laid bare. The story was far from over. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Detective Hayes and her team launched a full-scale investigation, tracing the connections outlined in the ledger. Each name was a thread, pulling us deeper into a web of deceit and danger. But as the circle tightened, the stakes grew higher. I met Hayes at a local diner, the hum of the early morning crowd around us providing a semblance of normalcy amidst the chaos. She slid a folder across the table to me, her expression grim. We caught most of the small fish, she said, sipping her coffee. But there's one name that keeps popping up, one we can't seem to pin down, Marcus Trent. Trent? I echoed, the name sending a chill down my spine. Why does that sound familiar? Hayes leaned in, her voice low. He's a ghost, Michael. No records, no history until about a year ago. But he's connected to several of our key players. And guess what? We think he's not just the operator, he might be the mastermind. The implications of her words hung heavy between us. So, what's the plan? We bring him in, she declared. And I think I know just how to do it. We set a trap. The plan was simple yet risky. Using the information from the ledger, we would lure Trent to a drop, one he wouldn't want to miss. I was to be the bait, under heavy surveillance, of course. The night of the operation, the air was tense with anticipation. Hidden in the shadows, I waited at the designated spot, a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of town. Hayes was a silent shadow nearby, her team positioned strategically out of sight. Minutes ticked by, each second stretching endlessly. Then, a figure emerged from the darkness, Marcus Trent. But as he stepped into the faint light, my heart stopped. It wasn't a stranger's face that greeted me, it was Tom, Clara's brother. Tom? My voice was barely a whisper, disbelief clouding my senses. You're Marcus Trent? Tom, Trent, smiled wryly, a hint of sadness in his eyes. I had to, Mike. After my business tanked, I was drowning in debts. Danny introduced me to the game. It was supposed to be temporary. But the smuggling, the deaths? Clara? I struggled to understand. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Clara wasn't supposed to be involved. Danny went rogue, he was a liability. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. Before I could respond, the air erupted into chaos. Lights flashed, voices shouted, and within moments, Hayes and her team had Tom in cuffs. He didn't resist, his resignation evident as he looked at me. "I'm sorry, Mike," he said as they led him away. "For everything." In the aftermath, Clara was cleared of the most serious charges, given her cooperation and the evidence against Tom. The web of deceit had been unraveled, but the cost was etched deep in the lines of her face. We sat across from each other once more, this time in a quiet corner of the visiting area in the prison where Tom was held. "Can we start over?" Clara's voice was tentative, hopeful. I took her hand, feeling the weight of everything that had passed and the possibility of a future yet to be written. "Yes," I said simply. "We can try." As we stood to leave, united in our resolve to rebuild, I knew that while the shadows of the past would always linger, the light of truth had the power to guide us forward. The final piece of the puzzle was in place, and with it, a chance for new beginnings.